Ms. Kishma Simpson, Senior Director, Jamaica Library Service. Professor Paulette Ramsay, author and senior lecturer in the Department of Modern Languages and Literatures, Faculty of Humanities and Education, University of the West Indies, Mona Campus. Mrs. Keisha Walton, Senior Librarian, Jamaica Library Service. Viewers across Jamaica and the world, good morning and welcome to the Jamaica Library Services Read Across Jamaica Day Reading Relay. My name is Marsha Jack, a librarian at the Jamaica Library Service, and I will be your Master of Ceremonies today. The objective of Read Across Jamaica Reading Day Relay is to promote the significance and value of recreational reading for all ages, as well as to introduce a wonderful book we've all read and love and want to share it with you. The title of this book is Miss Jen by Professor Paulette Ramsay. In today's program, we will give you an introduction to the book, as well as to meet and engage with the author. We look forward to a wonderful program, and we are delighted that you have decided to join us today. At this time, I welcome Ms. Simpson to bring the opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Jack. And thank you, viewers, for joining us as the Jamaica Library Service stages its inaugural reading relay in observance of Read Across Jamaica Day today, under the theme, Reigniting a Passion for Reading. Read more, read better. Each year since 2005, the Ministry of Education and Youth, in collaboration with the Jamaica Teachers Association, collaborate to observe Read Across Jamaica Day. As an agency of the Ministry of Education, the Jamaica Library Service has been supporting this important observance, and our public and school libraries across the island participate by visiting schools and reading to students at different grade levels, and also engaging students and adults in our public libraries for reading. The Jamaica Library Service is unique in this endeavor to read across Jamaica by virtue of the fact that we have island-wide coverage for public and school libraries. The Jamaica Library Service has over 110 public libraries island-wide, and we provide service to 898 school libraries, government schools across Jamaica. So our public and school libraries island-wide are uniquely positioned to host reading across Jamaica. Today and throughout the day, we invite you all, not just here virtual, but to visit our public library spaces and participate in readings across Jamaica. We also host this virtual and inaugural virtual reading relay to cater to our adult audience. Where you might not be able to visit our physical library space, we're delighted to host you here in our virtual space. And we use this opportunity to remind you, as grown-ups, Read Across Jamaica Day is also for you. We want to also use the opportunity to invite you to become a member of our public library and to participate in recreational reading. Our reading material is free. There's no charge for membership, and you are able at your luxury to access loan of reading material in more than one volumes to satisfy your reading appetite in whatever area you may have of interest. We also want to promote our collection when we do Read Across Jamaica Day. And the books we select from our collections are chosen by their literary merit, and as I said before, to promote the resources that we have in our collection, and in particular, those publications that are local or Caribbean. Our inaugural virtual reading relay cuts across Jamaica through 6 regions. And so today we will have 6 readers who will join us virtually, beginning from the parish of Hanover. The reading relay, as you were told before, will feature the Jamaican book titled Aunt Jen by our own Jamaican author, Professor Paulette Ramsay. Professor Ramsay, we welcome you and thank you for joining with us. We are truly delighted that you're also here to share in this reading relay, and viewers, we will hear more from her later on in the program. This story is told through a series of letters from a young girl who writes to her mother in England. And her mother actually migrated to England for a very long time. It's a very interesting and relatable reading experience, and many of us across Jamaica can relate to our parents migrating to England. Having read the book and sharing some of the excerpts, I encourage you all to become a member of the library and access this book for loan, which is also available in our 13 parish libraries. This morning, we will whet your appetite on the content in this Aunt Jen's character as she writes to her mother in England. As you listen to the story excerpts relayed by librarians and friends of the library, we also invite you to become a member to also participate in our national reading competition. The registration for our reading competition is open and registration closes on May 13. Registration is open for children and adults, children from the age of 6 to 99 or older. You can become a member and enter the national reading competition. Registration closes May 13. Your membership is free. Please visit the Jamaica Library Service website where you can access additional details to enter and participate in the national reading competition. Viewers, please join me in welcoming our readers across Jamaica who will participate and pass the reading baton as follows. We start in the north with Hanover, and in the book, Hanover is where the story is set. Ms. Vonette Jones, senior librarian from Hanover Parish Library, will start, and she will pass the baton to Trelawney, where Ms. Sophia Lishu Palmer, a teacher at William Nick High School and former national champion, in the national reading competition, will read. Ms. Nelia Nolan, the 2022 national runner-up in the 15 to 20 age group, will take the baton in St. Mary. And then in the center, in Manchester, Ms. Jasmine Kennedy, and in Clarendon, Ms. Antoinette Queen Burrows, our library team member. And the final lap will be read here in Kingston by Ms. Twyla Whelan, Public Relations Officer from the Jamaica Information Service. We invite you to listen keenly, post your questions and comments, your emojis, your likes, and enjoy reading, 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 reading. Reignite your passion for reading. Read more, read better as we read across Jamaica. Thank you.
Paulette Ramsay, 21st February 1970. Dear Aunt Jen, last night I had a very bad dream. I dreamt that I was on a ship which was sinking. I jumped from the ship to try to swim to shore, but I began to sink. You were also on the ship and you jumped off to try and rescue me. But as I reached out to grab your hand, you turned into a river mama and swam away. I told Ma about my dream, and she said it's not a good one. She said that a river mama is a sign of bad luck, and she doesn't like it at all. She asked me to describe the ship, and when I did, she said it looked just like the one you went to England on. This is the third time I'm dreaming about you. The first time, I dreamt that you were standing in a boat in Johns River, and you were calling me, but when I started to come towards you, you disappeared and left the empty boat rocking from side to side. In the second dream, I saw you boarding a boat with some other people. I decided to follow you onto the boat, and I was just about to put my foot on the plank when a big, tall, strapping man pulled it up and the boat sailed away. You didn't have a face in the dreams. Well, maybe I just didn't see your face, but I know it was you. In any case, I don't know what your face looks like. I really don't remember, but I know that you are the woman I saw in my 3 dreams. Something I can't explain what makes me know it was you. That is why I decided to write to you. I asked Ma if she thought it was a good idea to write to you, and she said she would neither say yea nor nay. She said maybe if she was me, she wouldn't write. But she not me, so I must decide for myself, because is every donkey to him sankey. So I decided to write. Apart from telling you about my dreams, I don't really have much to say. In any case, Ma says when you are writing someone for the first time, the letter should not be too long. The part I find strange about my second dream is that you didn't seem to see me at all. You walked away with the other people without seeming to notice that I was there. Anyway, I want to ask you before I close if you ever dream about me, and can you send a picture of yourself for me? Ma says I must never ask anyone for anything, but it's just a picture. So maybe that is not so bad. Bye, Sunshine. 27 May 1970. Dear Aunt Jen, it's been 3 months since I wrote to you, and I have been going to the post office every day to see if you replied to my letter. Ma said give it 1 month for my letter to get to you and another month for your reply to get to Jamaica, but I still haven't gotten a letter from you. I am thinking that maybe you didn't reply because you're upset that I called you Aunt Jen in my letter. Maybe you think that is too familiar. Ma always says familiarity breeds contempt. I mentioned it to Ma, but she said not at all because it's just a name, and you couldn't be so finicky about a name. I did not explain in my first letter that everybody in the house here always calls you Aunt Jen. Ma always says to me, your Aunt Jen sent some money for you, or your Aunt Jen says she's sending a parcel for you. I always call you Aunt Jen in my mind. So I hope that is not why you did not reply. Well, if that was why, you can reply to me now that I explained it all. I'm anxious to get your letter. Love, Sunshine. P.S. Please remember the photograph. 3rd June 1970. Dear Aunt Jen, I got a letter from Uncle Roy today. He writes to me very often. He says he always thinks of me as his daughter because I used to call him Dada when I was little. It's funny, but I think of him as my father too. I remember how he used to play with me and tickle me. He would throw me up in the air, catch me and put me down, and then run and hide and shout, "Come and find me." I used to have so much fun searching for him under the beds, behind the doors and in the closets. One day, he hid in Gram's big hamper basket, and I couldn't find him until Ma showed me where he was. Ma used to say he was just like a little child, so jokeified, but he was just happy and loved to make me happy too. I remember everything just like it was yesterday. I cried so much when he went to America, but I was very happy when I got his first letter, and now even though I still miss him a lot, I love to get his letters. He sent me a picture of himself with his wife. She looks like a nice lady. Her face is sort of pretty, not very pretty, but she looks all right. I was wondering if you would look like her in your picture. or maybe better. I told Uncle Roy that I wrote to you and you have not replied. He said he would talk to you about it. I didn't tell him to talk to you to ask you anything. I just told him that you never replied to any of my letters. Anyway, I hope he gets you to write to me. He says he doesn't think you're vexed with me about anything, but maybe you're just working hard right now. Ma is a bit upset with you for not replying to my letters. She doesn't say so to me though, and I know she doesn't want me to know that she is upset. Because when I ask her why she thinks you did not reply, she says, I must just be patient. But the way her face changes every time I ask her about it makes me realize that she is not pleased. Anyway, I was just sitting down doing nothing, so I thought I would write to you. Actually, I like to write. Sometimes I write poems or letters to myself, so I enjoy doing it. Sometimes I think that maybe you didn't get my letters. Sometimes letters get lost. Still, it would be strange if my 2 letters to you got lost. Uncle Roy always gets my letters. I am going to end the letter now because I hear Ma calling me. I think she wants me to go to the shop to buy something. Every time I go to the shop, Miss Mabel asks me, Sunshine, how is your Aunt Jen? I always say, fine, Mom. That's what Ma tells everybody when they ask her, except Aunt Sue. Sometimes I hear her telling Aunt Sue that she hasn't got a letter from you for a long time. And sometimes she tells her that you sent an empty letter, even though she told you things hard. Anyway, she says she prays for you night and day because she doesn't know if your life in England is rough or easy. You don't tell her the full story she told Aunt Sue. Anyway, the last time I went to the shop, Miss Mabel said to tell you that it's time for you to come back to Jamaica and look at your old friends' faces before they die. She asked me if you didn't have any plans to come back to Jamaica this year, and I told her I didn't think so. When I told Ma, she said Miss Mabel is a nice lady, but she mind everybody's business. Ma says I must realize that people always ask questions, but shut mouth don't catch fly. Well, this is a very long letter, so I will end it now. I hope you get it and reply to me soon. I'm looking forward to your letter and photograph. Love, Sunshine. P.S. This morning when I told Ma I wrote you another letter, she just looked at me and said, Sunshine, less turkey, less yours.
July 19, 1970. Dear Aunt Jen, I can't wait to get your letter before I write to you. I feel that what I have to tell you is so important that I must write and tell you right away. Ma went to Mother Penny about my dreams yesterday. She said Mother Penny said they are serious dreams and she doesn't like what she's seeing at all. She told Ma that she could only tell her the meaning of the second dream because she needed me before her so she could read me up and see what the first and the third dreams mean. She says the second dream means that you have a man who plays an important part in your life. She says he's a strong man. He is domineering. He rules you. He controls you. She says you are afraid of him and he doesn't know that you have a child in Jamaica. She says the dream means that when he finds out about me, he is going to cut off all communication between us. Just like how the man in the dream pulled up the plank and prevented me from getting to you. Ma says she'll take me to hear what the other 2 dreams mean next week when Uncle Johnny gets paid and gives her some money. She says I'm to wait until I know the meaning of the other 2 dreams before I write and tell you anything. but I can't wait for 2 weeks before asking you if any part of Mother Penny's interpretation of the dream is true. Do you really have a man who is ruling your life? Did you get married again? I really don't think you have, because you would tell Ma and Uncle Roy, and Uncle Roy would tell me. In any case, I heard Ma tell Aunt Sue that your life is mashed up forever because my father says he's not giving you the divorce and you won't be able to marry another man. So I'm thinking that maybe Mother Penny is not so good at interpreting dreams because her explanation makes it seem as if you are married again. And Ma said she was sure you can't marry again. I have to go now. Ma is calling me. 2 days later. I am just getting a chance to finish this letter. Ma caught me writing it and said that this writing thing is going to damage my eyes. She says I do too much reading already, and if I add all this writing to it, my eyes will go right back to where she brought them from. Every time Ma thinks that I'm using my eyes too much, as she puts it, she talks about where she brought them from. Even though I know that nothing will happen to my eyes, every time she says that, she makes me a little worried. I wouldn't want my eyes to go back to where Ma took them from. That was a long time ago. About 7 years to be exact. I woke up one morning and my 2 eyes were red like ackee pods, as Ma put it. They itched and itched and itched. Nobody could figure out what happened to them. Ma took me to Lucy every Friday to an eye specialist, but he said he didn't know what to do to stop the itching and clear up the redness. Even now when I think about it, I can feel the itching. Ma gave me carrot juice every day until I hated the sight of carrots. That didn't help. Every week, somebody else came to Ma with a different remedy. None of them worked. One day, Granny P came and told Ma that she heard about a remedy that would cure my eyes. Ma decided to try it. She would try anything at that stage. So every morning, she woke me up early to wash my face in the dew on grams, dasheen, and cocoa leaves. That was bad enough, but after that, I had to go to Blossom's house, Auntie Mary's daughter, and she would squeeze milk from her breasts into my eyes. Well, I don't know if it was the milk or the dew or both that worked, but my eyes got better quick after that. The itching stopped and the redness cleared up. Every time I look at Blossom's son, now I remember how I used to get some of his milk in my eyes. I really wouldn't want my eyes to go back to where Ma brought them from. But I don't think that writing these 2 little letters will do anything to them. I will just make sure that Ma doesn't see me writing. I have to go now, but I hope to get a letter from you soon. Until I hear from you, sunshine.
September 25, 1970. Dear Aunt Jen, I got tired of teaching the hibiscus hedge 6 and 7 times, and I'm not in the mood to study right now. So I decided to write to you. I think this letter writing thing is fast becoming my hobby. I went to see Granny P this morning. I visit her every other Saturday. I like to visit her. She makes me feel nice and warm when she puts her arms around me and pulls me against her bosom. When I was little, she would squeeze me until I felt like I was stifling. Then she would push me away from her and say, "We have to comb this hair. Whoever comb it don't know that they should take the hair out of your pretty face, eh?" And she would put me to sit under the breadfruit tree, take her comb out of her apron pocket, pull out my hair, and comb it all over. When she was finished, she would step back and look at me and say, "That is how I like to see your face." She told me this morning that she's proud of the nice young lady I'm growing up to be. She says I must always walk the straight and narrow path, keep myself circumspect, and stay away from bad company because if you sleep with dog, you have to catch them flea. As usual, when I was leaving, she reminded me that I always have a place to stay at her house. She said that if anything ever happens to Ma or Gramps, she will be happy for me to live with her. She says she knows you wouldn't mind. I would willingly live with her because even though she's a no-nonsense person, she is kind. I'm sure I would get along with her. She doesn't quarrel and shout when she's speaking her mind. She simply tells you what she's thinking. That is a peaceful way to live. Speaking of living peacefully, Uncle Johnny came home stone drunk last night and created such a rumpus he woke up the whole district. He was like a volcano which erupted without any warning. He bellowed out some bad words long from here to Crossroads and back. I still can't believe that was Uncle Johnny. He cursed Mr. Dennis, who he says is a wicked slave driver, because he doesn't pay him a proper salary for all the work he does for him. He cursed Mrs. Chung, who he says overprices her goods, so he has to pay her half his salary when he wants to buy a decent shirt to put on his back. He cursed the tractor which he drives to Mr. Dennis, because he says it's slower than Mr. Walcott's old mule. He cursed the long-faced cow he bought from Moses Johnson, because he thought it would have about 2 cows by now, so he could sell them and make a profit. He cursed you for not writing to me so that every night I have all kinds of fool dreams about you to make me want his money to go to Mother Penny for interpretation. When Gramps told him to stop disturbing the peace in the house, he said nobody would be at peace until he leaves Mr. Dennis's half-dead job and goes to America to earn good money. Gramps told him he will give him the money for his plane fare when he sells the next crop of rice. I've never seen Uncle Johnny behave like that. He must have been very frustrated because he's always so easygoing and jovial that nobody would suspect that he has a problem. I felt so sorry for him when he threw himself on his bed and bawled like a baby after Gramps said he would help him to go to America. He screamed like when Ma's kettle is letting out steam. We all stood at the door listening and watching helplessly until he became quiet. Gramps threw a sheet over him and left him to sleep. Poor Uncle Johnny. I don't want him to go because I won't have anyone to play dominoes and cards with me. Sometimes when I try to cheat in a game, he tickles me until I feel like I'm going to faint. When I say, "No, Mr. Johnny Scarlett, I won't cheat again," he stops tickling me and says, "A cheating woman is an abomination to the Lord." I want Uncle Johnny to find a better job and be happy, but I don't want him to go. It will be just like when Uncle Roy left. It seems that all my favorite people always leave. I don't like America and England. Everybody I want around me goes away to these places. I will never go to England or America when I'm big. I'm staying right here. When we left the room, I asked Gramps if he would really help Uncle Johnny to go to America, and after a long silence, he said yes. As much as it pains his heart to see his last child go, he will help if it will make him happy. He said he would never in a million years guess that Johnny has so much pain bottled up inside of him. Gramps sounded like it pained him to talk about it. Ma has not said a word about it. She never likes any of us to talk too loudly in the house. She is always quick to tell us that bush have ears, but last night she couldn't even find those words. I think she was shocked. She always says that Uncle Johnny is such a decent young man. I have a funny suspicion that that is why she left so early this morning to go to Aunt Sue's house. I think they're going to pray and fast for Uncle Johnny all day. When I peeped into Uncle Johnny's bedroom this morning, he was still fast asleep. I think he's totally worn out after all that ranting and raving last night. I still can't believe that he had so much worrying about, and he didn't let any of us know how he was feeling. In fact, he's still sleeping now, unless he's awake, but he's too ashamed to come out and face Gramps. Well, all this riot that Uncle Johnny created last night made me get a lot of information from Gramps that maybe I wouldn't get otherwise. It seems as if he was so shaken up by Uncle Johnny's outburst that he couldn't sleep. He sat in his rocking chair smoking his pipe and staring into space for a long time. I went and sat beside him and stared into space too. After a long time, I decided to talk to him. I asked him what he was thinking about, and he said in a quiet voice which I would never associate with Gramps, that he was thinking about his children. He told me that he was sad when you went away. You were a bright girl, doing well in school, but you got mixed up with my father and got into trouble, so he sent you away to Kingston to live with your Aunt Joyce until I was born. He arranged everything so that 2 years later, you were on a ship to England. I told him I thought you were married to my father when I was born, but he said my father didn't stop asking questions until he found out where you were and followed you all the way to England and married you. The part of this history lesson that surprised me was when Gramps said he was so happy when he came to your senses and left the ugly brute. Gramps said when you decided you wanted to go back to school because you wanted to be a nurse, my father told you that he didn't want his wife to work. Gramps says you quietly packed your things one day when my father was at work and left. Gramps says thank God for that brave step. You are a fully qualified nurse today. He says he misses you though, and Uncle Roy. But he doesn't worry about Uncle Roy so much because he can take care of himself. It's you he's concerned about, especially now that you won't reply to my letters and Uncle Roy says you're sick. I couldn't understand why Gramps was so upset that you're away when he was the one who sent you away in the first place. So I asked him why he sent you away if he knew he would miss you so much, and he said he sent you to seek your fortune. Well, when I think about this fortune seeking thing, I think of the people in the storybooks who are always leaving to go and seek their fortune. Most of the time, they end up doing something good for a prince or a king or a queen, who then takes them to their castle or palace and gives them some of their gold and diamonds and jewels. Sometimes they let them live in the palace or castle with them and dress them up in pretty clothes. The prodigal son in the Bible went to seek his fortune too, only that he didn't have as much luck as the ones in the storybooks, and he ended up going back home poor. I hope you find your fortune by now. Speaking of palaces and castles, have you been to Buckingham Palace? Have you ever seen the Queen? What does she look like? Every time I think of her, I picture her like one of the big dollies in Miss Matara's shop in Green Island, just smiling and sitting still to make sure her crown doesn't fall off. Last week in Girl Guides meeting, I almost got in trouble with the leader because I asked her which queen we were promising to serve, and she said there's only one queen, and that is the Queen of England who lives in Buckingham Palace. I told her that I thought there were queens in other parts of the world, such as Africa, but she said I should not show my ignorance. I must just say the promise and stop asking foolish questions. And if I know how many brownies, Girl Guides, Cub Scouts, and Scouts in Jamaica say it every day without asking stupid questions. Guess what? Gramps just told me that he's going to give Ma the money to go to Mother Penny to see if she can really figure out these strange dreams that I've had. I was so shocked when he said it, I almost dropped off the chair. Boy, he must really be worried about you. I'm sure Ma will be even more shocked when he gives her the money to go. Can you imagine Gramps, who always said such terrible things about Mother Penny, giving Ma money to go to her? I'm telling you, Aunt Jen, now I know that Gramps really loves you. He loves all his children, whole-heap, whole-heap. He doesn't talk much, but he carries a lot of love deep inside of him. I think I started to love him last night too. He changed from being a stony old shadow to being a real Gramps. I wish I could begin to know you, just like how I got to know Gramps a little better last night. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that soon you'll be writing to me and telling me a lot about yourself. Anyway, I have to stop now. This must be the longest letter I've ever written. Take care of yourself. Love, Sunshine. P.S. As soon as Ma gets the money from Gramps to go to Mother Penny, we will go to her and I will write and tell you what she says about the dreams.
The 30th of June, 1971. Dear Aunt Jen, today I sat and thought about you for a long, long time. I thought about how strange it is that you're my mother and I am your daughter, and you are there and I am here and we don't know each other. And if I came to England or if you came to Jamaica, we would pass each other on the streets and you would not know me and I would not know you. We would pass each other and not know that we are flesh and blood. That is really strange. I tried to picture you sitting in your house in England. I can barely see a body. Maybe it's a body like Ma's, only a little younger. Maybe it's a body like mine, only older. It's very hard to see a picture of you in my mind. I can't see a face. I tried to imagine the face of a lady who looks like Uncle Roy and Uncle Johnny, but it's not working. I tried to picture a lady who looks like me, as Uncle Eddie said, but that does not work either. It's like trying to see my own face in a dirty mirror. I'm still hoping you will send me a photograph of yourself. Sunshine. The 15th of October, 1971. Dear Aunt Jen, Grump says I'm to write and tell you that you're spreading your bed hard with the family. He says if you don't change your ways, shape up, and keep in touch with us, you're going to reap what you sow. He says I'm to write it exactly the way he says it. I don't know why he doesn't write and tell you himself. Maybe if you got a letter from him, you would reply to him. Anyway, when Gramps starts to talk, you know that the things are bad. For Gramps does not talk or interfere in anything that's happening in the house. He gets up in the morning and goes to look after his yams, his rice, and his animals. He comes home late in the evenings, eats, smokes his pipe, goes to bed after 8 o'clock. He sleeps, wakes up next morning, and leaves. That is his daily pattern. But your behavior has been so strange that not even Gramps can ignore it. Can you imagine that Gramps is now talking about going to Mother Penny himself to see if she can tell him anything about you? I think that he's secretly wondering if my third dream means that another terrible tragedy is going to happen in the family. Your silence and all this news about you being married has added to his confusion and concern about what is happening in your life. You have become a real mystery to all of us. Ma and Gramps are worried because they don't like the secrecy. Aunt Sue says You must be really hiding something. She can't believe you could be so hard to keep everybody guessing and speculating. I don't know what to think. I was curious about you at first, but now I'm not sure it makes sense to continue to write to someone who never replies. Sometimes I don't agree with Aunt Sue that you must have a good reason for not writing. Please excuse me for saying so, but sometimes I think it takes a hard, cold person to behave the way you are. Sometimes I get real angry with you. Sometimes I feel like I would rip you to pieces just like the letters. Let me give you a little piece of advice. Try not to let Ma wash her hands off you. I heard her telling Aunt Sue that anyhow she decides to wash her hands off you, you could be dead, alive, or ailing. It will not matter at all to her. She's serious. Write to her before things get to that stage. Sunshine. P.S. Take my foolish advice, as Ma would say.
Dear Aunt Jen, Christmas came and went, and the new year is 20 days old now, and not a word from you. Every day I get up and just think about how you didn't come for Christmas. You didn't come, you didn't come, you didn't come, you did not come. You are a hard person. Dear Aunt Jen, I'm in a good mood today. At least I am feeling better than the last time I wrote to you. Of course, my good mood has nothing to do with you because nothing has changed where you are concerned. I write, you read my letters, you fold them and you put them away, or maybe you tear them up and throw them in the garbage. I don't know what to do with them, and I'm not sure that it really matters now. Let me tell you why I am in a good mood. I just got my report, and I finally beat Milton and Jimmy in math. I came first as usual. Of course, you didn't know that I always come first in my class. But I always wanted to beat those two ugly boys in math. They're not really ugly. They're just full of themselves. I always beat them in all the other subjects, and I've been longing to beat them in math, even by 1 mark. Well, I whipped them good and proper this time. Even I have to admit though, that they are very good at math. But I think that their marks have been going down because they are so taken up with politics these days. They spend most of their time discussing the election which is going to happen soon. Well, all of us talk about it a lot and we can't help it because all the teachers encourage us to talk about the elections in class and everywhere you go. Now people are talking about it. Most of us in my age group understand what an election is about for the first time, and I think that is why Milton and Jimmy are so excited. At first, Ma and Gramps and I were not paying much attention to it because of Uncle Johnny's death. But everybody talks about it so much now that Gramps started to talking about it too. Uncle Eddie used to talk to Gramps about it because he says it is the most exciting election that he can remember. I think all the old people like the excitement that this person that most people say will be the next Prime Minister is creating. He calls himself Joshua, so everywhere you turn now, that is all you hear. Joshua is the leader. Of course, in Flower Hill and Lucy too, you have people who say they still want the same Prime Minister. They say they know him and they prefer to stick with the evil that they know rather than swap Black Dog for Monkey. But Uncle Eddie says there's nobody else for him but Joshua because the word is love.
Uncle Eddie walks around with his rod these days. He says it is the rod of correction like Joshua's rod. Nowadays, Gramps gives me money to buy the gleaner for him when I go to school in Lucy because he has to read about Joshua said at his political meetings. Since Uncle Johnny died, this is the only thing that has really made him get a little excited. Maybe he's using it to take his mind off Uncle Johnny. But Ma is still only thinking about Uncle Johnny. She says she doesn't see what the excitement is all about. Aunt Sue says she agrees with Ma and she doesn't like all this talk about. The word is love. She says when people talk about love, all the time like that, they could be real ginnals. Ma says maybe they're not ginnals, but they don't need to talk so much about love. They must just act. Action, she says, speaks louder than words. Furthermore, Ma says this word is loving thing just put her in mind of Mistress De La Gueda's sons. One day, I will really have to find out this thing about Mrs. De La Gueda's sons because every once in a while, Ma mentions it, but I don't really know the story. Well, I think a lot of people, even Milton and Jimmy, are excited for the wrong reasons. I think they like this man because he's such a good talker. He can talk and talk and talk for hours without stopping. His voice is powerful and almost magical. You could sit and listen to him for hours without getting bored. He's a good speaker. People love that. They love to hear him say the same things over and over for 10 times and they get excited. I started to study the history of Jamaica since independence, and I agree with Gramps that maybe it is time to try new kind of politics. Gramps says we need new people and new plans. I agree. Well, Ma says she is a Labourite from the days of the chief, and she has no intentions of changing now. She says no other leader is as good as the chief. And anyway, she says not a new leader and not a rod of correction can bring back Johnny. That is all that matters to her right now. Gramps says he's still grieving for Johnny, but election is a big thing, and it seems as if Labour really going to lose for the first time at last, so we have to talk about it. Anyway, I was telling you about Milton and Jimmy and how all they talk about these days is Joshua and how Joshua is going to change things for people like us. They go to political meetings all over the place. I think they have decided that they want to become politicians. Well, when I saw that they are missing classes sometimes and that their mind is not really on school work, I realized it was my chance to work harder at the math that they always beat me at. It worked. So I'm just feeling on top of the world now. Anyway, I must be a real cocoa head because I don't know why I keep telling you the things that are important to me. I should go back to the hibiscus edge.
Must have heard the news by now. I know Uncle Roy will tell you. Mr. Dennis is buying Gramps' entire property. He bought all the land from over Kane right back to Johns River. The only land that is left now is the piece with the house. Uncle Roy says he cannot sell the house where so many of us grew up and played and ate good flour dumpling and afu yam and rundown. The most important thing about that piece of land, he says, is that is where 3 of the people who mean the most to him are resting. He could never sell that piece of land, and in any case, that place can stay there for all of us to use at any time for as long as we live. Gramps always said Mr. Dennis had his eye on his lands because they are good cane land and rice land. He said he bought his land when he came back from Panama because that was what he wanted to pass on to his children. I know that Gramps would not want Mr. Dennis to get his land because he always said Mr. Dennis had more than enough land already. He always said that when he passed away, if his children didn't want their inheritance, then they should divide it up in small lots and sell it to people who need land, not to people who walk around and collect land like they're collecting playthings. I'm sorry that Gramps' wish to keep his land out of Mr. Dennis's hands didn't come true. But Uncle Roy says it's the best way to make sure we don't end up with all this land just sitting down and not helping anybody at all. He says it is sad, but the truth is that the people who need a little piece of land can't afford it. So the simplest thing is to sell all of it to Mr. Dennis, since he has the money to pay for it. He says it doesn't make sense to hang on to the land and worship it. And as much as he doesn't like Mr. Dennis's grabby ways, he will take his money for the land if it means that we won't be waiting forever to sell the land. Well, I was shocked when Uncle Roy said Gramps changed his will a month before he died. He made Mr. Phillips executor instead of Ma. He changed everything so that when Ma died, his 2 living children would inherit a quarter each of the property, and the other half of it would be for Sunshine. That is to say, half of the money Mr. Dennis will pay is for me. Aunt Sue says I'm covered for life. I have money to live and go to school. She says Gramps never did a better thing. He was not so fool after all. She says all this time he was sitting there, he wasn't just smoking up his lungs. He was thinking and planning, sensible. Gramps left a cow for Aunt Sue, 2 for the Salvation Army Church, 1 for Sunny Hill Church. I'm sure Ma did not read that will, or she would give all the cows to Sunny Hill. Gramps had a special love for the Salvation Army because he said that they care about poor people. The other cows and faithful old Mavis will go to the rest of Gramps' and Ma's relatives. I would like to know how you feel about all of this. I imagine it doesn't really matter to you. Uncle Roy was kind of worried that he might think that Gramps left too much for me, but I told him that I don't think that you're interested in anything that Gramps had, and that I would be surprised if you even want your quarter share. Anyway, you are the best person to tell us how you feel about the whole thing. I am fine, even though I would prefer to have Ma and Gramps right now. Sunshine.
Welcome to the Portland Parish Library, your place for information, education, and recreation, embraced by the neighboring arms of the majestic Errol Flynn Marina in the heart of Port Antonio. Our warm and competent staff are here to meet your needs through a range of programs which include free computer training for all ages. We are especially proud of our Project Pro 101 training designed to develop the research and technological skills of students at the primary level, as well as our CyberTalks training aimed at sensitizing students at the infant school level about computers. We boast a reference collection that caters to the needs of students at all levels of the education spectrum, be it PEP, CSEC, or CAPE. We offer an array of services including spiral binding, printing, and photocopying, all at a low cost. Have no device or internet to engage in your online classes? Don't worry, whether you're a teacher or student, we are here for you at the Portland Parish Library, no one will be left behind. And guess what? It's even better if you become a member. Visit the Parish Library or any of our 5 branches located in Buff Bay, Oak Bay, Long Bay, Hector's River, or Bybrook. We await your visit.
Enough to want to read the entire story of Sunshine and her letters to her mom, Aunt Jen, and take a look at her life in rural Hanover in the 70s. Let me take this opportunity to give a shout out to Wycliffe Martin High School, joining us from over there in St. Mary. Thanks for joining us. In our next segment, Mrs. Keisha Walton will be our senior librarian here at the Jamaica Library Service, will be having a chat with Professor Paulette Ramsay, the author of this must-read book. Professor Ramsay holds a Bachelor of Arts, a Master's of Arts, and a Doctor of Philosophy from the University of the West Indies, Mona campus. She has gained wide recognition as an interdisciplinary scholar and researcher who is known in the region and internationally for her work in the broad field of modern languages and literature. She is also recognized for her scholarship in Afro-Hispanic cultures. In other words, culture and literature of Black people who live in Costa Rica, Ecuador, and Mexico. But today she is mainly here in her capacity of the author of this wonderful book, the book that we just heard excerpts from. And by the way, in addition to Aunt Jen, Dr. Ramsay has published 3 collections of poetry. Please welcome Professor Ramsay and Mrs. Walton.
Thank you. Professor Paulette Ramsay, we are very honored to have you here with us today. Inaugural Read Across Jamaica Day, Reading Relay. We chose Aunt Jen, your book, for this historic event, mainly for 3 reasons. Okay. One, it is an outstanding example of a book that is appealing to more than one age group. So although it's for a young adult audience, adults will enjoy it as well. And 2, its portrayal of Jamaican issues, values, and culture is very authentic. And 3, we believe that it will be engaging to our active readers, they'll enjoy it. And also our lapsed readers, it will whet their appetite and encourage them to renew their library membership.
Okay,
So,
I'm happy to hear that. Thank you very much. It is my honor to be here, and I'm very grateful to Jamaica Library Service for having selected Aunt Jen. I am really delighted to be here to experience with you this very novel idea of a reading relay. I've never heard of a reading relay before, but I think it's a wonderful way of encouraging people to read. And it's not just for children or youngsters, it's for the entire Jamaican. I think it's something that's really needed because there has been a decline in reading. I grew up in a community in which there was a branch library. I don't know if you still have those little branch libraries, but I lived there. And I used to just love for the books to come from Lucy because I lived outside of Lucy. We had our tiny branch library, and the van, they had a van that would come and they would exchange the books on I'm not even sure if it was a weekly basis or bi-weekly, but I've had a rich reading experience and I've always wanted to see more of that. So I commend and congratulate the Jamaica Library Service for this initiative. I do agree with you that Aunt Jen is one of those books that can be read at almost any level. And most most of the conversations that I've had about Aunt Jen are with adult readers. I know that the Cape students do it, and that's at a very advanced level. I know some schools do it in second form, some in third. I deliberately set out for it to be that kind of book that would appeal to a wide readership. That is something I admired about the writings of Jamaica Kincaid, who is one of my favorite writers. And I always knew I would write one day. As a young girl growing up, it was my dream to become a writer, a creative writer. And I knew when I read Annie John that my books would resonate with Annie John, where anybody could. There was a space for readers at all levels, because reading is about comprehension and comprehending at different levels. So some people will comprehend at a very literal level, some will become more inferential, and others will get to the very critical level. So I'm happy that you recognize that, and I thank you again for choosing Aunt Jen.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, Professor Ramsay. You have shared a lot about what prompted you to write. But let me ask you, why in letters? Why did you choose that?
Okay, so the epistolary genre appealed to me primarily, I would think, as a result of how I grew up. I grew up writing letters. I grew up in a letter writing age. I didn't grow up in the email age where you just sent a little thing, or, you know, you could jump on the telephone every second and contact somebody. We wrote letters. We were encouraged to have pen pals and to write to those children's own. Anybody here knows the children's own and the pen pals? Yes. So we were encouraged. I went to school when teachers encouraged us to write, and we were taught to write different kinds of letters, right? And different compositions. So I enjoyed writing. I grew up writing to friends all over Jamaica, to relatives abroad, and to my own mother who was living in England. So I'm probably jumping into one of the questions that you want to ask me.
That's fine,
If sunshine is me, no, the answer is not, because I had a vibrant, ongoing communication with my mother. So I wrote letters. I probably didn't write as frequently as Sunshine writes, because Sunshine is writing out of a different kind of motivation. My communication with my mother was the normal kind of exchange, where you write a letter, you mail it, and then you await the response and you write back to the person. In the case of Sunshine, she's writing to a silent person who perhaps replies once and never after. So there is that desperation and urgency that's propelling her to write. But I did write to my mother, I wrote to friends, to my aunts and uncles but I grew up in a letter writing era. And I wanted to write a book that was not in third person form, that would talk about the person. Her name was Sunshine, and she lived in Flower Hill, and she used to write. It seemed so impersonal and distant. I wanted a direct conversation between Sunshine and this mother who is absent. I wanted a talking book, and I wanted conversation. So if you look at it, you notice that it's letters, but then it also incorporates aspects that are perhaps more in keeping with the third person narrative form. So there's conversation, there's a lot of description and storytelling. I wanted a form that would allow for strong orality. Okay, so I wanted it to be steeped in the oral tradition, because that is how we are as people, as Jamaicans. When I had a grandmother who was a master at storytelling. So all of that, I thought this letter form would lend itself to.
Well, you have achieved all of that.
Thank you.
Well, let me ask you though, the book is set in the 1970s. If you had set the story in 2023 Jamaica, how different were the characters, the family patterns, life in general in Boyen's pasture? How would that change?
Oh, it would be very different. It would be influenced by social media. Inevitably, it would have to be.
Yes.
There would be a lot more telephone conversation, a lot of television. It would have to reflect so much of the realities. It would be a different place. There is so much. See, and what Aunt Jen does is to preserve a lot of what we have lost. So there are many children, even in rural Jamaica, who do not know much of what I write about, because so much has changed. When you go to rural Jamaica, you don't hear the proverbs. You don't hear people sitting and telling Anansi stories at nights. Everybody's watching some movie, some Indian movie or African movie or something, right? The culture has changed so much. The interest has changed so much. So one of Sunshine's main hobbies is to write. She's writing and she loves to write because she also reads. She's reading The Gleaner and, reading everything that she comes across. We don't have children doing that so much anymore, right? They're not writing, and if they write, they are not writing in continuous prose. They are writing letter U, R, and it's an emoji, right? So writing is suffering, reading is suffering, and there's a sort of symbiotic relationship between the two of them. The reading helps the writing. So what you're doing today is a very good initiative. And I hope it will be available for, others too. And I hope you will repeat it and, with another book in another form somehow. But we need to take back reading to the communities, and we need to get the schools to read. We had a reading session in school. We used to stand up before the teacher and read. And then it got to a point where the teacher said to me, okay, you stay down there, you read by yourself, you don't need to come up. And she would just supply me with books. We need teachers to be doing that more.
Let me ask you, Professor, what books did you read when you were at Sunshine's age? And where did you get your books?
Oh, as I said, there was a branch library in my community. That was when I was younger. Once I went to high school, the Jamaica Library, Parish Library is right there. You come out of Rossies and it's down there. I don't know if you know where Rossies is, on that beautiful peninsula overlooking the sea. And we would walk down, and Jamaica, the Parish Library is right there beside the parish church. So we went there to study. We studied. We went there to find books. And so I had those books. We didn't call it a book club, but looking back now, I'm realizing it's a book club. In my teen years, there was a group of us who read a lot of Mills and Boons. I don't even know if they write those anymore. And we thought they were the greatest things. And we would exchange Mills and Boons. But when I was younger, I read a lot of Enid Blyton. Read all the Enid Blyton books and the Wind in the Willow books, that series. I read Jack Schaefer and all the American writers that were available and English writers and so on. I just had to see a book and I would read.
Really?
Yes.
What was your first Jamaican book or West Indian book that you read, and what was the impact on you? How did you feel?
My first West Indian book would have been Andrew Salke. I think my first one was Earthquake, as I remember. Andrew Salke had this series of books: Drought, Earthquake, Hurricane, a cow. No, it was C. Everett Palmer that had a cow called Boy. So I read those books, and what I liked was how they resonated with me in terms of the Jamaicanness. You know, it was easy to understand the context. It wasn't a context that was not familiar, like when I would read Enid Blyton books and all the fables. Remember all those fables with animals that talked and all of that. So I liked that. I loved Everett Palmer because he was from Hanover. And yes, he's from Kendall, Hanover. Then I'm trying to think back to who I read as Jamaican early in the day.
You mentioned Annie John earlier.
Well, I read Annie John later, you know, because she's a later Jamaica Kincaid who is from that little island, Antigua. She's from Antigua. She lives in the States. I read her later, many years ago, but much later. The other ones I'm talking about, I read as a youngster. And then I read people like Michael Anthony and so on, with Green Days by the River and so on. There are so many I can't remember all of them.
That's fine, Prof. We're doing quite well, and
there were many of them. Yes.
And let me take you outside of the book a little bit now. No, there are two different covers.
Yes.
So you have one here, quite vibrant, relatable. The other one is more muted. Looking at the picture is almost as if someone is missing.
Yes.
Someone has drowned. Is there a significance? Why the difference?
Okay, so let me begin by saying that the publishers chose the covers.
Okay.
So this one with the boat is the first cover.
Yes.
This is for the first edition, right?
Okay.
So it just means that Aunt Jen is doing very well. So they have now brought out a second edition. And if you look at the second edition, you'll see that it says Caribbean Contemporary Classics.
Okay.
So they used it to launch a new series that they're kind of experimenting with.
Yes.
And they used Aunt Jen and Letters Home, and then they included some others that have been around for a long time. So if you look at the back, you will see, for instance, I think it's Old Story Time, which is a very, very old one, and Harriet's Daughter. Those were included. So they used Aunt Jen to launch the Contemporary Caribbean Classics in its second edition. The first cover is, even though it's muted, it's more subdued, it's actually the one I like.
I was going to ask you.
Because I didn't like it when they sent it to me, I have to confess. But it actually picks up on one of the motifs in the book. The very first extract that was read by the Hanover Parish Library read that extract of her dream of the man in the boat and the boat going off, and the man preventing her from reaching her mother. So when I eventually agreed to the cover, I was resisting at first. I said, okay. So the idea of separation is seen there too, right? There is a space between the land and whatever that body of water is. The idea of it has such a deep perspective that you get the idea of somebody journeying off and somebody wanting to reach out to whatever lies beyond there. I think it's a cover that allows itself to a deeper conversation. This one now is very flamboyant, very rich in colors, very Caribbean.
Yes.
But I have to be honest and say I have a problem with it. And I fought with them over it. I said, first of all, I don't know what tree that is. I don't know, maybe you can tell me. It's not an identifiable Caribbean tree as far. They said it's mango. I said, okay. And I'm not sure. It's a kind of, for me, it's a kind of stereotypical representation of that mother. My grandmother, if let's say I had a vision of my grandmother for the book, she never wore an apron. So for me, it's a kind of stereotypical representation of the Black grandmother, right? Dressed in the apron there with her head tied. My grandmother never tied her head. I don't know if I have a picture of Ma in the book as a woman walking with her head tied. So, and then I'm not sure about the hairstyle. What is that hairstyle? Is she braiding her hair? When you look at it, is that what you get? That she's putting, when I say braids, I mean extensions.
Okay.
So I said to them, in the 70s, little girls knew nothing about extensions. They plaited their hairs and they would fly all over the place, and somebody would tie a ribbon and so on. Some of us look very stupid, but that's how we walked around. So anyway, it's not a big deal. The important thing is to get the book, the words behind the covers to get out.
Yes.
But I could write 3 papers on those covers. That's me. That's the critical thinker in me.
Yes. Well, Professor Ramsay, now there is a sequel, and I'm sure our readers will be happy to know that, and that is Letters Home.
Yes.
Now, Aunt Jen was first published 2002?
Yes, a long time ago.
All right, and Letters Home 2021.
Yes.
So it's a little time lapse there. Did you have the sequel in mind when you first wrote Aunt Jen?
Not at all. Not at all.
Tell us.
But I recall that very soon after Aunt Jen was published, a group of students from teachers' colleges came to the university and was asked to talk to them about Aunt Jen because they were studying it in their English literature program. They still do. And one of them asked me, when we need a sequel. But I was not. At the time, I was so deep in my research because, you know, we have to work to become professors. We have to publish. I was deep in my research. When I do the creative writing, not now because I'm a professor now, so I have a little more time. It doesn't mean I'm not to still do my research, but I have less pressure. So I can do more. But at the time, I wanted to get the research out. So this idea of a sequel was not on my mind at all. But in the meantime, I published 4 collections of poetry. So I was still doing a lot of, I have Under Basil Leaves, October Afternoon, Star Apple Blue, and Avocado Green. And this thing that is not a thing. That's the last collection. So there it's just a lot of busyness to find the time. So I say it's a sequel, but it doesn't have to be regarded as a sequel. The sequel, the idea of the sequel is to satisfy those persons who really wanted a sequel. But it can stand on its own. I'll tell you something very interesting. I went, I think it was 2015 or 2016. I went to France to talk. I went to 1 college and 2 high schools that were doing Aunt Jen. And one of the projects that one of the high schools did was to have the students write back. They were writing as if they were Aunt Jen. And the teacher was very creative. They had them doing that. They had some of them continuing the novel to say what happened after my last letter. And I found that they eventually put them together in a kind of virtual thing and posted on their website. But I thought that was very interesting that there were so many people who thought that there was more to be said. But when I did the sequel, I didn't want it to be what people expected. So I've always felt that my research must also inform my creative production. So much of my work has been on diaspora communities, diasporic communities, people who have not just the original us. Well, I'm not one of the original, not just people who are descendants of the original people who were taken to different places to be slaves, but descendants as well as the movement of West Indians to other places. And that's such a big thing in our history that I think we don't know enough of. And so I wanted to talk about that, find a skillful way of integrating that in the book. So I have Aunt Jen's father who went to Panama, went to Cuba in this book, right? They have a rich heritage of moving, which is what Jamaica is. There are so many of us. Once you start talking about the Jamaican communities, because there are several Jamaican communities in Cuba, then you will have somebody say, you know, I have an uncle who went and never came back, or my grandfather went. You talk to somebody about Panama, they know somebody who went. There is so much of that has happened mainly through Jamaica, mainly because we are, I don't know why we are so restless, but we seem to have moved a lot more than some of the other groups, and also because we are more numerous in the English-speaking Caribbean, that is. So I wanted some of my research to inform the creative work, right? And I wanted us to understand a little more of who we are as Jamaicans, of where we have been, what we have been doing, and the many, many contributions that Jamaicans have made to other nations. So when you read that, Jen, this is a personal encounter, a personal experience of a little girl with her mother. The mother is silent. There she is, she's silent. You're not getting her responses, her feedback, what is happening to her. In Letters Home is where you get her speaking now, albeit too late. And you're hearing the stories of people, Windrush people who went after Windrush, because one of the things they refer to them as the Windrush people, but Windrush was one ship that made one voyage. People think that everybody who went to England in that period went on a ship called the Windrush. No, there were several ships. There was the Irpinia, which was a very common one, right? There are several of them, and they went all over the place before they got to England. And the later people, like my uncle and some of his friends, don't like to be called Windrush people because they went later. They went in the late 60s. So, they had a rough experience, but it still was not as bad as the early Windrush people. So I wanted the Jamaican contribution to the building of England, of the United Kingdom, to be said, to be highlighted. So you get that in the mother's voice. And all of these are stories I've got from talking to so many of these people in my many, many trips back and forth to the UK. I wanted the Panama story there, the canal, the way Jamaicans built the canal, Jamaicans and other West Indians, mainly Jamaicans, Costa Rica, Cuba. Jamaicans have just been all over the place. So this thing of, there's a perception, perhaps, that some Jamaicans are lazy. I don't know how that came about, because that was never our story. Or your grandparents, my grandparents, or foreparents were not lazy people. When they didn't have work, what did they do? They went to find work. They jumped on ships. They didn't know where they were going, but they went because they couldn't sit without working. So ours is not supposed to be a story about lazy people. And we have made so many contributions to the building of other nations. And that is one of the things I wanted to come out in Letters Home.
Professor Ramsay, we thank you so much for your contribution. I've had the pleasure of asking you all these questions.
Yes.
We want to give our audience the opportunity, if there are any questions, that we'll take a few. Okay, and then after, we would like you to read an excerpt from Letters Home. We can't have you leave without
I
getting
will
that
happily
treat,
do that.
Professor, please. All right. So any questions? Okay. All right. So we have one from Jasmine Kennedy. She's asking, Professor, what is your advice for young persons like herself who want to become an author or venture into writing?
Okay, so the first thing I'd say is that you must love language and love to use language. You must love words. Words need love. That's what Brathwaite said. Words need love too. By that I mean spend time understanding how words work, how words function, how language functions, the relationship among words. Understand this whole matter of audience, of how you write for different audiences, right? So the way, decide who you want to be your audience when you write. Are you going to write for young children, or are you going to write for adults, or are you going to write to a book that can appeal to children at one level, teenagers and adults, right? And that comes from reading. You have to read, read, read. And when you read and see how, other writers write, then it begins to open your mind to what the possibilities are. I would suggest that if you want to be a writer, you do literature. When you study literature, so my main area is literature. I teach literature at the university. I teach Spanish literature, but all literature is literature in a different language. So do literature. So literature will help you to understand how writing functions and how writing has layers of meanings, and that this is what, when you write, you want people to find the meaning and the meanings, levels of meanings of your work. If depending on the kind of writing you want to do, a course in linguistics would not be unwise, especially sociolinguistics, so you understand the Jamaican linguistic situation a little better, right? Because you want to be able to, if you read on Jen, you will notice that I write along the spectrum, right? So there is Creole there. There are different levels of Creole depending on who is speaking, right? There's standard Jamaican English, and you have people who just, by the time Sunshine is a young adult, she's getting ready to go away and study, she is able to just move through the linguistic mode. She's able to speak her proverbs. She sounds like Ma, but she's a very bright girl, so she can speak her standard Jamaican English. And that is what you want. You must understand the linguistic situation of Jamaica.
Thank you. All right, so we'll have just that question. Professor, please, could you share an excerpt from Letters Home?
Yes, thanks. One last thing I want to say to the person who asked the question about reading, about writing, is that it's also helpful to do a course. If you can do a course in creative writing, right? And there are several of them in Jamaica and in other parts of the world. That also helps to hone your skill. So I'll share two very brief excerpts from Letters Home. Papa said as a young boy, he felt that he should take care of his mother and his brothers and sisters. He did not want to work anymore with Mr. Whitelock or any other Bakra master, so he started looking around for work. He said he got the Panama idea one day when he went to Animal Hill to visit his mother's relatives, and he met a man who said he just came back from Panama, where he made a lot of silver. He said Panama was the place to go to make money. Silver, lots of silver. The man was well dressed, Papa said, with his entire set of front teeth in gold. He was in a three-piece suit and had a white handkerchief drying his forehead because the sun was hot. The man just kept smiling and sweating, smiling and sweating, and saying, I can build myself a nice house now, buy land for my two sons, and put a little bit in the bank. I would tell anybody who wants to change his life to go to the zone. Papa said when he asked him, so you think I could go? He said, what age you have? 15, Papa told him. And he said, you're kind of young, but I see many young boys working hard for silver. Try your luck. Papa said he did not tell a soul anything until after he got all the information and checked out everything. And one day before he was to leave, he told his mother. She was unhappy. You're going to Panama tomorrow and you did not say a word to me? How you going? Where you going? Why? What you going to do? They know your age? Papa had lied to the American man about his age. Maybe they did not believe, but they did not ask for his birth certificate because he was tall and strong and could pass for 21. He was determined to go and prove that he was strong and he could earn money and come back to look after her. When Papa went to the canal zone in Panama, the canal was almost finished, but he says the work was still rough and hard, and the man did not warn him about the diseases that could wipe you out in 1 week: yellow fever, malaria, and dysentery. Nobody, not the man in Animal Hill or anybody else, warned him about the food and how it was insipid. It was real hog food, he said. That was the reason he was so fussy about his food. Manish water, roast bread fruit, and ackee and saltfish in coconut oil. That is food, he used to say. He said 1 year and a day in Panama eating that sauce bickle made him make up his mind that for the rest of his life, he would have to get good food to eat. One day, he told us about the Colon Man song. He said they made up this song to make fun of the people who came back from Canal Zone in Panama. They came back dressed to pussfoot like the man prancing in Animal Hill with gold watch, funny suit, and fancy hat. But some of them couldn't read and write. So even though they had the watch dangling on a chain from their waist, they would still look up to see where the sun was in the sky to tell the time. For weeks after that, we would ask him to sing the song, and sometimes we would sing it with him and clap and dance. 1, 2, 3, 4, Colon Man a come. 1, 2, 3, 4, Colon Man a come. 1, 2, 3, 4, Colon Man a come. With him brass, generally, Kimberly, bam, bam, bam. That was Papa. I'm glad I didn't see him when you said all he was doing was work, sleep, eat, and not talk. Not my Papa. Not my Papa at all. And the last brief one I'll read, that's part of a chapter. Okay. There are many people like me in England. This is Aunt Jen writing now. Well, it was Aunt Jen before telling Sunshine about the way Gramps was. So in Aunt Jen, she says, Gramps doesn't talk. He's so reserved. And she's saying, no. And so she's telling how he used to tell about his Panama experiences and so on. So she's back now talking to Sunshine. Very interestingly, in Letters Home, she is trying to get Sunshine to talk to her when she never replied when Sunshine used to write. She says, there are many people in England like me, came to this place with our hopes high, sail away from our beautiful countries to go to England. We said we would stay for 5 or 6 years, and then we couldn't go back because we kept waiting for the right time. A few people went home and some came right back. They went home to a different place that they didn't know. Jamaica changed so much since we left. Same thing for all the islands, different from when we leave them. Today I ask myself if I miss my chance to go home, but it doesn't matter now. It does not matter. No daughter, no family, no mother. I wonder what my mother would say about me now if she saw me lonely, eating by myself every day in this cold country. If she thought that I came here and did not become a nurse as she and Papa wanted, would Mama place me as Smaddy? Mama had 2 groups of people, Smaddy and not smaddy. Smaddy was somebody who, she said, never waste them life, make something of it. Not smaddy was a loser, and not smaddy was lazy, and not smaddy was idle and not serious about anything, and not smaddy was not bright and was just full of too much false pride based on nothing. What would mama say about me now? I think I am smaddy, somebody. But mama's standards were different from mine. She probably would shake her head and say not a word, just shake her head. If she thought I really turned out to be a not smaddy, she probably would not say it out loud. You could not always tell what mama would do. But I'm alive, just waiting for the English marigolds to bloom again. Marigolds. I used to love marigolds when I was a little girl. I would pick them and put them in my hair, or just pick them and smell them all day. I loved to watch the bees buzzing around them. It was my favorite thing to do in the evenings after school. Sometimes I thought I would become a seller of marigolds. English marigolds, beautiful. Jamaican marigolds, beautiful too. Sometimes I dream of marigolds. One bright morning when this life is over, I will fly away to a place that is full of marigolds. Beautiful, bright yellow marigolds.
Thank you. Professor Ramsay, I have this comment from Sylvia Brian, and I think it sums up so much. It says, thank you for presenting our realities with such love and respect. And a question here from Ms. Kishma Simpson. And I think I would not have done justice if I concluded without asking and to get your feedback on this one. It says, have you ever lived in England? And if so, how does this influence the writing of the story Letters Home? It was so vivid, life in England at the time.
No, I've spent long periods in England on and off in the summers, especially when my mother was ill and so on. I've gone to England a lot. I actually love a lot about England, especially the countryside, the landscape is very, very beautiful. You know, every time I say it, I also have to add that I understand now why writers like Wordsworth and Blake and all these poets wrote so much about, you know, the English countryside. And when all of us used to have to memorize all these poems, like the one about the daffodils, remember that one? The daffodils, I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high, or hills and vales, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. We had no clue what we were talking about, but we're learning all these things. But to see them now, you know, is actually a delight. I interviewed a lot of people, so the research for this book was intense, and I had so many people. My mother talked a lot. The structure, when you read this Letters Home, so there's another voice of an uncle who is supposedly mad, who is writing there. And just spilling, you know, just talking because he's in dementia, I suppose. And, or what is the other one? Just talking in a very unstructured kind of way. But his condition is the result of ill treatment that he has had. And there are many Jamaicans who went to England and suffered like that. Yes. I talked to I have an uncle who is in his 80s in England, and he would, you know, just sit me down. Sometimes he would remember things and he would just call me and say, listen, this is so-and-so, try and get this one in. My stepdad, their friends, I would go to the pub with them and they would talk. So my next book is actually, it seems I'm stuck in that place to tell that story. My next book is also going to be, you know, a continuation of their experiences and so on. So in my head, And I usually walk around with a book in my head for a little while before I sit down. So a lot of research went into this book.
Professor, you have been so generous. Thank you so much for sharing.
I'm just repaying generosity with generosity. You have been generous. I want to thank all of you for organizing today. Can I give a shout out to Hanover, to my parish, at my Hanover library? I don't know if I know. I used to know a librarian there, Yvonne Hewitt. I know she's not there anymore. But that library used to be a space that we revered as students, you know. Was a beautiful, Hanover used to be Lucy used to be very beautiful. I don't know what somebody did to it, but I couldn't say it's still very beautiful. The sea is still very beautiful. That blue, I've never seen anywhere except maybe in on the St. Thomas coast.
Yes.
But Lucy used to be quaint and just beautiful, like somebody painted it. But it has been allowed to unravel, sadly. But I really, I've enjoyed today, and I thank you all for doing this. And I hope Jamaicans will respond as you would want them to, and would come out. Go out, find a library. You have a library in every parish, right? And you still have branch libraries in the little communities?
We do.
So there,
All
you know,
Jamaica.
people don't, you ask me where I grew up in a home where my stepmother was a primary school teacher. So we had lots of books in my home. So I read books. My school, K Valley Primary School, had a lot of books as well. And we read, and I had teachers. When I was in grade 6, my teacher gave me Animal Farm to read. Of course, then, because I was reading way above my age level. So she said, well, you've read all the books, you've read the ones I have, try this one. And I read it, but I understood it as a fable. At the time, it was an animal story. Then I went to university, and it was one of the literature books, which is a whole different, you know, horse of a different color. And we got into politics, the political significance of the book, and so on and so on. But this is what literature is. This is what reading does. And this is why I say to the person who wants to write, you have to do literature, because you learn so much from literature. It takes you everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you too to all our viewers. Enjoy.
Well, welcome back, viewers. Thank you again for joining us. The Jamaica Library Service would like to thank the following persons who made this inaugural Read Across Jamaica Day reading relay a success. Huda Education for donating books. Thanks to the readers of the excerpts. Staff at the parish libraries who facilitated the pre-recordings, the planning and technical team here at HQ and in the parishes. We'll also like to thank Professor Ramsay for blessing us this morning, Mrs. Walton, and everybody else, persons in the audience, you know, for coming out and joining us, especially you, our YouTube viewers. Thank you so much. We also invite you to become a member of the Jamaica Library Service. You could register in person or online at jls.gov.jm. You know, Aunt Jen and other local titles can be found in the West Indian collection in all the libraries in all 14 parishes of Jamaica. They are usually shelved separately under the West Indian collection sign, and the West Indian books have a code, LF, meaning library, local fiction, or if it's a non-fiction book, it'll have the letter L preceding the call number on the spine, right, on the label. At this time, we'd like to, you know, thank Professor Ramsay by, you know, giving her a donation. And I'm sorry, A token of our appreciation, welcome Miss Hutchinson, who will present her with this token.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Again, we thank you for tuning in this morning and see you next year. Happy reading, everyone.
You still